Hello everybody, Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape. I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, and I've been making cards for about 30 years. My goal in my card making is to simply spread joy one card at a time. And I'm hoping that as you watch my videos and see some of the cards that I make, that you too will make those cards and share them with your friends and family and spread that joy one card at a time. Let's go ahead and get started. Today I'm going to share with you a really fun waterfall pull tab card. This is one of the first kind of interactive cards that I learned to make a long time ago. And I am going to kind of just walk you through the steps. I've pre-done some of the parts because I don't think you need to watch me do all of those things. And we will, I'll tell you what I've done so that you're aware of it, and give you measurements so that you're able to make this card as well. One of the things that I have recently started doing is whenever I'm working on what I call a fun fold card, or really any card that I really like the layout of, I'm creating a template for that card. And when I create that template, I'm using retired cardstock, retired designer series paper. It doesn't even have to match. But what it does is allow me to have a model I can go back to so I can recreate the card time and time again. I got that idea from a demonstrator by the name of Jackie Boughs, and highly recommend this technique if you've got layouts that you really like. It's very easy to go back and recreate them, and I'm actually going to show you my template for this particular card. Like I said, I've got retired designer series paper, I've got some retired cardstock. None of it really goes together. The designer series paper does because it's from the same packet. Doesn't match the cardstock, and that's okay. What it does do is give me the template so that I can easily create my pull tab card. And that's what I really want to do. On the inside of the card, I'm not even using very vanilla or basic white cardstock. Why waste that when I do have retired cardstock that I can use? So I just note with a VV or a BW that that's what this layer would be inside the card. And on the back of my card, I write down where I got it from, what the measurements are, and that type of thing. And then I've got a ready go-to card that I can pull out of my file and recreate this. So the card I'm going to make today is actually using the Framed and Festive stamps, and this is part of the Fitting Florets suite of products collection that's available between now and January 4th of 2023. This is actually a set that you can get in addition to some other great products in this suite, and it includes the framed florets, these dies, this stamp set, which is the limited time offer, as well as these fun gold swirl enamel self-sticking things, and then this gorgeous Fitting Florets designer series paper. Now, the stamp set and the dies will be available in the January mini catalog that comes out starting in January 5th of 2023. But these enamel items, the stamp set, and this designer series paper are only available through January 4th of 2023. And again, I'm just using the images from this stamp set. And it actually is, I'm trying to remember now which two, Christmas. I'm using this one on the outside, and then From Our Home to Yours on the inside. So let me go ahead and start providing you with measurements, and we can go ahead and get started with this card. So to start with, you're going to have a card base that measures 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. You could also, as my sample shows here, use a 5 1/2 by 8 1/2 piece of cardstock, scored at 4 1/4. Either one works. It's just the standard size card base. So again, I'm using real red cardstock. My particular card that I'm showing you today measures 4 1/4 by 11 inches, scored at 5 1/2. And then I have another piece of real red cardstock that measures, I did this one with just 1/8 inch borders, so it actually measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, because I really wanted it to fill up the front of my card. And I am using the Merry Melody 3D embossing folder, which can be found on page 176 of the annual catalog. Okay, so I ran that layer through the embossing cut and die machine with the embossing folder, and I've just adhered it to the front of my card. The next layer that I did was worked on the inside of my card. This particular piece is 4 by 5¼ inches. And to do my sentiment, I used my Stamparatus because I wanted to emboss it so it's shiny. And so I used the Stamparatus, lined up my stamp, first stamped it in real red ink, and then cleaned off my stamp and used my Versamark ink and stamped right over that image. Because I was using my Stamparatus, I didn't have to worry about it getting off or not lining up. And then I just use clear embossing powder, so that just gives a little shine to the inside of this. So I'm going to use my seal tape, and make sure when you're using this that you use a light touch and kind of the check mark at the end of your swipe. That prevents it from getting all gummy most of the time. I find that when I press down hard, it tends not to work as well. And I'm just going to make sure that that's adhered to the inside of my card, and that pretty much takes care of that piece. And then the next thing I'm going to do is you need to have a piece of 3/4 inch by, I had this measurement wrong the first time I used it, 3/4 inch by 3 7/8 inch. And that is just going to sit on top of this piece of cardstock. And when you adhere this, you're going to want to just adhere it to either end. And the reason for that is our pull tab mechanism is actually going to slide underneath that piece. And so you want to make sure that you're adhering it really well and you're keeping the center open. So I am recommending that you use tear and tape. You could also use the Seal Plus, or if you like the Tombow liquid glue, that would work as well. I'm more of an adhesive person, and so I'm going to do that on the two ends here. And got a little bit long, so I'm just going to fold that over, peel that off here. We'll get rid of these two pieces, and then make sure that you're opening your card up the right way. And you're going to want to place this on the card so that you have roughly, it's roughly an inch from the bottom of your card to the bottom of that strip. And the reason for that is that you want it to actually be centered. The final pull tab piece, you're going to want to have it centered on your card, if that makes sense, centered on the front of the card. And so that 1 inch piece gets you pretty close to that. Okay. And then the next piece that you're going to have is a 2 inch by 9 inch piece of cardstock. And this piece you are actually going to be scoring at 2 inches, 2 3/4, 3 1/2, and 4 1/4. You may see a faint score line here. That's an error, but I'm just using this to demonstrate because I wanted to show you where you're going to attach your front designs to this piece as well. So again, it's at 2 inches, 2 3/4, 3 1/2, and 4 1/4 inches. So each of these three spaces are 3/4 of an inch. And when you're adhering your front panels, and by that I'm referring to these squares, you're going to adhere it just below these score lines. And the reason it's important that you go below the score lines is that it will allow the flipping piece to occur automatically. If you tape over that score line, it isn't going to fold down and flow quite as nicely. All right, and then to decorate this panel, you are going to be creating 4 different squares, and you can use designer series paper, you can use stamped images, you could die cut things out, however you want to decorate it. But the basic things that you need to know for this is these squares. In this case, I've got a layer of Mossy Meadow, and that measures 2 by 2 inches, and you're going to want to cut 4 of those. And then I have used the white glimmer paper on 3 of my squares. I don't know if you can see that in the camera or not, but there's sparkle all around that designer series paper, and that's true on these first 3 layers. This piece of glimmer paper measures 1 7/8 by 1 7/8. And depending on the design that you're creating, you're going to need 3 or 4 of those. And then in my case, I used designer series paper on 3 of the squares. That designer series paper simply measures 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. So the square is decreasing by 1/8 of an inch each layer that goes on here. On my bottom layer, because I used a larger sentiment, I just used a piece of basic white cardstock, and this is measuring 1 7/8 by 1 7/8. That's just a tweak that I made. On my sample here, you can tell that I've got the piece of cardstock, and then I've got a piece of basic white cardstock followed by a piece of designer series paper, and I've carried that through on all 4 layers. So it just depends on how you want to tweak it once you're all done. You will, at the end of that tab, want to punch a hole so that you can thread ribbon through, because that's going to be your pull tab. In this case, I'm using the glitter, basic white glitter organdy ribbon that's in the annual catalog. And I've just tied it with a knot through that hole. Now, the next place that you're going to put adhesive is going to be right here. And so, again, because this is going to see a little bit of pulling and tugging, I'm going to recommend using tear and tape or adhesive, or the adhesive of your choice. You can use liquid glue, whatever is your go-to adhesive. You just want to make sure that you've got it adhered well. And this is the part that I was most confused about when I tried to recreate this card, is where do I adhere this piece? So what you actually want to do is, let's go ahead and tuck this whole strip of paper underneath that 3/4 inch strip. So you see how I've done that? And you want to get it centered, and kind of, hopefully this is going to be centered up and down. And then I am just going to work with this so that mine isn't quite centered, and that's okay. It's still not at the top of the card. A lot depends on where you put this strip. So I'm going to center it top to bottom going this direction, and then I know that my adhesive is just on the back of this layer, so I'm going to just press it down onto my cardstock. Okay? And now, with that one little strip of adhesive, all I have to do is pull my card, and I've got the waterfall piece done. I think I just went off camera there. Sorry about that. So hopefully you can tell what I'm talking about. I actually would prefer to have this down a little bit lower, so I am able to still shift that. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Lately I've gotten lucky when I've needed to do that. And I'm just going to drop it down a teeny bit. I think I had it a little bit too high. Okay, so now you see I've got this centered more top to bottom, left to right. I think that's really how it should look. And then I can just pull through, and I've got my cascading waterfall. So very simple card to make. You don't put any other tape on this strip. This actually flops and hangs loose. The only thing is behind that bottom square so that it can attach to this little strip that you've put through. So that is how you make a cascading waterfall. So I am going to repeat measurements for you one more time so that you've got them. Your card base is either going to be 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2, or you're going to make it a 5 1/2 by 8 1/2 piece of cardstock, scored at 4 1/4. It doesn't matter which way it opens up. And then this layer of basic red, which could also be designer series paper if you chose to, is measuring 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The strip here measures 2 inches by 9 inches, and it is scored at 2 inches, 2 3/4 inches, 3 1/2 inches, and 4 1/4 inches. And you're going to put your adhesive right here to adhere it to that strip. This little strip measures 3/4 of an inch by 3 7/8 inch so it layers up nicely. I chose to use all real red for mine because I really wanted the waterfall part to be the focus of my card, but you could use coordinating cardstock. You could even decorate this with some designer series paper if you wanted to. It all depends on what you've done with your squares here as well. The layers on my square, the Mossy Meadow color is 2 inches by 2 inches. You need 4 of those. And then I've got a piece of the glimmer paper, and that measures 1 7/8 by 1 7/8. And you're going to need 3 or 4 of those, again, depending on how you create your layers, especially the layer with the sentiment on it. And then the designer series paper on top measures 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. And again, you'll need 3 to 4 pieces of those as well. And I've used the Boughs of Holly designer series paper and the lovely poinsettias from that set. And then again, this sentiment is from the Framed and Festive stamp set. And I did the same thing utilizing my Stamparatus to stamp the sentiment first in real red, clean off my stamped image, redid it in Versamark, and then was able to use clear embossing powder, and that way I got a little bit of shine on my sentiment as well. And then just punch a little hole so that you can thread your ribbon through. Use this organdy ribbon or any other ribbon that you've got that coordinates with your project, and that's what they'll use to create the pole to make the waterfall and your designs cascade down. On the inside, I just used a standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of basic white cardstock. Pretty basic on that, with the embossed image on the inside as well. So there you go, a cascading waterfall card, and it would qualify as a pull tab type technique. So go ahead, give this card a try. It's a lot of fun. If you do, feel free to post some images to share that with people. And don't just make this card, but give it to somebody else. Think of a young child and how much fun they might have doing that pulling through. And just keep spreading that joy one card at a time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.